Welcome back to another episode of the Life Sciences Professional Podcast. Today, I'm excited to have our guest here, Harel Shachar, who's come from Isreal in 2014, hoping to continue his career in the medical device industry. He'll be able to share some information with individuals who are doing the same, coming to Canada or the US, either to begin their career in the medical device industry or continue their career. And some individuals do have some challenges trying to find ways to connect with hiring managers and corporations in the medical device or life sciences industry in general. And Harel will be able to share what that journey was like for him and what he did to be successful to continue his career and along the way. And I hope that some of these tips will be helpful for individuals that are looking to do the same. Stay tuned and welcome Harel along with myself in the Life Sciences Professional Podcast. Well, thank you very much, Harel, for joining us today. And I'm sure our guests are going to learn a lot about your journey coming to Canada and how successful you've been in continuing your career in the medical device industry. But before we get started, if you don't mind telling us a bit about yourself, that would be fantastic.
No, of course, Linda. And again, thank you for the opportunity for being here.
Yeah.
So my name is Harel. I was born and raised in Israel. I was in the military service for 3 years, since I was 18 to 21, discharged from military, started my academic background in life sciences as a biotechnology engineer. I did an internship program at John Hopkins University, got back to Israel, started to work at Protalix Biotherapeutics. As a QC analyst, was promoted to be a supervisor. This is where exactly the time I realized that I'm underutilizing traits that are very important to me to utilize on daily basis, but also that could move the needle towards business. And then where I started to pursue an MBA in Israel. During my MBA, I landed my first role as a territory manager at 3M in Israel in the healthcare division. In late 2014, my wife and I decided to take our 9-month-old child and move to Canada. I started to work at FroggaBio, also as a territory manager, moved to be a product manager. Once we got our permanent residency, that's where I pursued my passion to medical device, and then where I started to work at Baxter as a senior marketing manager. And I've been doing it for the last 5.5 years. I'm married, I live in King City. We have 3 children, ages 3, 6, and 9. In the last 2 years, I'm also part of a member of the board of directors for Canadian Friends of Betty Shapiro, which is a non-profit organization in Israel that supports children with disabilities. Actually, in late October, we ran a half marathon to raise money toward this goal. Couple of colleagues and friends. And I'm very happy to be here and share my experience with your audience, and hopefully they'll get the value from it.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks very much. And I'm sure that was quite an experience. You know, even in Israel, some of the things that you've done and accomplished, being in the military and then, going to the medical industry, QC, and then deciding to go back to school. I mean, that's a lot. And, what made you decide, just curious in terms of move to Canada? Why Canada?
Well, my wife's parents live here.
Okay, yeah.
Let's say when I justify this move to friends and family, I always say it was related to the cost of living and many, let's call it, external reasons. But the real reason is that I needed a change. And when my wife raised the option, would you like to move to Canada? It was, yes, let's move to Canada. And the funny thing is, I've never been to Canada before. But when I landed here, this was here to stay.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and retrospectively, 8 years after, I always brag that I have 3 good decisions that I've made in my life. The first one was marrying my wife. The second was leaving the bench and move to the business aspect of life sciences.
Okay.
And the third one is moving to Canada.
Okay, wow, fantastic. Well, we're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Right. We need all the talent we can get, so don't go anywhere.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So you've in terms of your own experiences coming to Canada and your goal and dream of, landing your ultimate goal in terms of continuing your career in the life sciences medical device industry, can you share, what you've learned along the way of making that transition to secure a role? You and I've talked, number of times about, those challenges and what that was like. And, you were really fortunate in terms of that first role. Can you tell the audience about that?
Oh, thank you, Linda. Well, for starters, my immigration process was much more complicated than the average. So it's not only that I struggled with landing a job in Canada, it was getting the paperwork. So I'll be able to work in Canada. And there was a lot of work behind the scenes in order to land on my first role at FroggaBio. And luckily, FroggaBio's owner helped me throughout the process. He's himself, ironically, is Israeli, who moved to Canada and couldn't find his first role. And that's where he founded FroggaBio, which is now thriving in both Canada, US, and elsewhere. So eventually things work out to those who work hard.
Right.
But when it comes to my experience, firstly, I would say I reached out to my inner circle to start to understand what should I do better in order to find a position that fits my profile and my aspirations. But I will also stress anyone that is looking for a role, ask the right questions, right people, and validate them. Because many times you'll get those type of suggestions that maybe were valid 8 years ago when they were here, or 10 years ago, but no longer applicable to the Canadian market. And sometimes they are not experts. And now someone who's looking for advice and consider them as a reference, they might act on it and not getting the ideal outcome they're looking for. And then you move to the Canadian market, which is much larger than the Israeli one, right? Forget about the market dynamics and all around it, but you have also the cultural differences. And cultural differences between the Israeli culture and the Canadian culture, significant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll talk about some culture differences.
Yeah. So for my first 3 years in Canada, I was surrounded by basically an Israeli culture, given the nature of FroggaBio, which was owned by an Israeli and many Israeli employees. So I was in still sort of Israeli bubble. And then this bubble burst when I moved to Baxter.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So when you say ask the right questions and, validate the roles, validate the fit, what advice would you give to individuals, doesn't matter what country they come from, when you're coming to Canada and they're asking those types of questions, how did you determine, what were the right questions, who to ask, who to reach out to? Are you talking about LinkedIn? Are you talking about different people that you talk to, individuals from your network who did go outside of, say, is the Israel bubble, as you call it? So it doesn't matter, what country you come from. If you want to move to organizations that aren't necessarily, if it's a Korean company or an Israel company that you start with, if you're branching out of that, is to talk to individuals that have done that. You look on LinkedIn or you reach out to friends that you've met. Is that what you're talking about? And asking them those questions? Can you kind of expand on that?
Yeah, of course. So firstly, do reach out to your inner circle, because that will be the easiest path, right? But you also have those type of non-profit organizations that also help newcomers when it comes to resume building, how to go through interviews. Sometimes they could even instruct you how to use LinkedIn and leverage it correctly. But you should reach out to your current network, then understand who is the network you would like to extend to, let's say recruiters or hiring managers at positions that you're interested in, and be very proactive. And to my point about those, let's say, questions and answers, I can tell you as someone who's been in the military, let's say one of the suggestions that I received when I came to Canada, it was leave the military experience behind. Don't put it in your resume because it's not perceived well, which I embraced and took it up, which is okay. However, after speaking with many hiring managers, after being much more comfortable in my roles, it turned out that the military experience is very beneficial and brings a lot of value.
I'm wondering who gave that advice.
And especially when you were sergeant and managed directly 20 soldiers. Right? So my point is, like, it's okay to get the advice, and maybe it is correct, but try to validate it with as many people as possible. Also depends on how critical it is, right? In this specific point, that was super critical. My military experience brings values that very few have in Canada. Let's say compared to Israel, when it's mandatory experience, like this is a mandatory service. So like you put your military service in the resume, it doesn't differentiate you from anyone else. However, in Canada, suddenly you bring like a military experience, and in combat and in commanding, that's suddenly like puts you in a different niche, right? And again, this is the insights that I received from those managers I spoke with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it does in the US as well. It's important because they understand the discipline, they understand, the way that individuals work together. And they also appreciate what people do for their countries when they are part of the military. So there's just different thought process behind it. And you are correct. When you've been a sergeant and you've managed individuals, when you're applying for leadership roles, it is valuable, right? So yeah.
And to be honest, not only for leadership roles per se, but let's say any position that you have, you should have some leadership attributes.
Yes.
And the military experience validates those attributes that, let's say, not everybody had in the military, but let's say high chances that you'll have it compared to others that I'm searching for.
Right.
Yeah.
And that actually leads into my next question in terms of what makes you different? Like, what are some of you've risked everything. And just like you said, you've never been to Canada. Most people, when they are going to move somewhere, they've at least visited. You didn't do that, right? You just said, okay, we'll go there. And you just embraced it, and you've taken a chance on a new life and new career, and you just do things. What makes you different? What is it about Harel that you think makes you unique?
Thank you. Well, I should have my wife speak.
We could bring her in, yeah.
Well, my mom raised me with two mantras throughout my entire childhood. The first one was never give up. And the second one was always ask. Worst comes to worst, the no is already in your back pocket, right? Like you have nothing to lose. Mm-hmm. So firstly, when I approach, let's say, even challenges, I have a can-do mindset, right? Even when I send emails, let's say, to my cross-functional team, I never ask, can we do it? I ask, how can we do it? And then you frame the task as this is possible, we just need to find a way, mm-hmm. right? So, and many times there are some things that are possible, it takes longer, but it also requires you some out-of-box thinking, right? This is where comes creativity. I don't consider myself as like super creative person, but like my rule of thumb that the more rules you have, the more loopholes you could find. And you need to find those loopholes where you could get in and get it your way. So you have the creativity aspect, so thinking differently. And then once I found this loophole, I become very methodical. And after like critical thinking and deciding that this is the route to go, like I already envisioned the process in my mind, stakeholders, timelines, and then I consistently pursue it at intensity and frequency in a pace that I determine in advance that won't just like marathon, right? You don't sprint the first kilometer. Yeah. You have a pace that like this is my goal, let's say within X months or days, I would like to have, like, to make it happen. This is the intensity and frequency that I could do it. And then I pound until it happens, right? You also have those like critical thinking. I know how to prioritize things and isolate myself from all the noise that happens around you many times. And I would say, like, my best example, when I was myself struggling with my immigration process, I had another friend who was struggling, and the only reason he struggled is that he kept failing the IELTS test. IELTS is an English exam that you need to pass at a certain score in order to get the needed points for applying for permanent residency. And I'm looking at him and I say, like, this is super weird because, like, your English is phenomenal. And he says, well, and he consulted, like, immigration consultants, like lawyers, and all they told him, like, all you need to do is to pass the English exam, right? But he couldn't, and he did it 3 or 4 times. And then when I asked him, he said, well, I was diagnosed with dyslexia when I was in 4th grade. And when I write, I have spelling errors that eventually deduct my entire points. I said, okay, this is interesting. And then I came back home and started thinking, like, Canada is a country that put on their flag equality. Now, let's say I lost both my hands in combat in Israel, for example, and I would like to move to Canada. Will Canada prevent me from doing that? That's weird. That's where I started to dig. And I found a subsection in the immigration laws that says that if you have either physical or mental disability and you're diagnosed in the province where you apply for permanent residency, they could eliminate one of the sections, right? It was late at night. I gave him a call. I told him, you need to be diagnosed in Ontario. Like, this is your only priority at the moment, to be diagnosed in Ontario. He was diagnosed in Ontario. He didn't get, like, the entire writing section eliminated, but he got extra time and he got, like, computer assistance. And a few months ago, he sent me a picture of his and his wife's Canadian passport. Right? This is a done deal.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. And so far, like, I would say, like, this is probably my top 5 successes in life.
Wow. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. That's great. And, you probably find working with different individuals in the organizations, I should say, that you've worked with, not everybody has the drive or the persistence or the goal orientation that you do. How do you find working with individuals that aren't maybe as disciplined or as focused as you? How have you managed through that?
Sorry, what's the question, Lina?
Well, working with individuals, not everyone is as goal-oriented as you, not as driven. So how do you collaborate with those individuals? How do you get them on the same pace, the same mission, same vision as you when you're working with them or you're leading a project? You've got teams that you work with. Not everyone's going to see it the way you do.
True, and that's a valid question.
They don't all want to run the marathon, right?
True.
Put it that way, right?
True, and that's where leadership attributes come in place, right?
Yeah.
So, like, you have a vision and you communicate it, but we also set expectations with all those stakeholders, right? And also, I don't expect everyone to operate the way I do. It's not that I put something, let's say, a project plan in line when I know that only a person like me will be able to execute at this pace.
Right. Yeah.
However, but I do set expectations correctly, and also asking, is it something that you could deliver, right? Because sometimes they could say, you know what, 2 days, this is something like I need at least 5 days. 5 days? 5 days it is, right? But, like, now we have a clear expectation that I know that I will get this delivered within 5 days. And, like, maybe I'll have another 3 days delay in my initial plan, but for at least I know exactly what the bottlenecks are and how we should operate. And there are many things that you could do in parallel. Sometimes, like, when you come to project, there are some things in sequence, there are some things in parallel, and then you play around it. But I do believe that I have managed to create a collaborative system with my cross-functional team. They know me, they trust me, and eventually, when it comes to those type of relationship, you have this combination of trust and competency. So my track records of success. When they ask me for something, they know I'll deliver, and I'll also deliver at the times that they ask it for, right? This is where prioritization come in place. But they also know how I care about their matrices, right? Especially when it comes to marketing, right? You have availability of product, you need it by that and that. But I also know that my supply chain planner has KPI.
Right.
I always ask them, like, what do you care about? What is so, like, what is the most thing that is important to you? And then they provide it to me.
Right.
So, and once I know what's important to them, I navigate the business that their KPIs will be hit as well. Right? So like if I suddenly say to the planner, I need it urgently and I need to be air freight, she knows this is not a wolf. This will be air shipped.
So going back to newcomers coming into Canada and or the US and looking to secure a role and they land one, right? So they get a new role working for a company in Canada and the US, and the cultures are different, right? The way that people communicate and, you know, diversity, inclusion is a big thing in both countries, right? They welcome new individuals that are both they're diverse, right? That's what we're looking for. We want, it makes companies more profitable, more successful. And we want inclusion. We want people to feel comfortable. But what are some of the things that individuals need to be aware of themselves? Because countries are different. And, you know, you shared with me that there was big learning that you had that you weren't even aware of when you first started working in Canada, and some things had to be brought to your attention, or you just notice nonverbal cues that were happening because of the way that you still continued to communicate, which was similar to the way that you communicated in Israel, just different. Can you chat about that? Let's share with the audience what your learning was.
Yeah, so firstly, I would start with some background on the Israeli culture, which I consider, let's say, very blunt, direct, sometimes may even be perceived as aggressive, right? Now, when I was in Israel and conduct the way I do, I would not even say do, the way I did, right? Because I also like dialed down myself. But like in Israel, I was probably around the average John Doe in the 15th percentile. And then I moved to Canada. And after like living FroggaBio in the Israeli culture, like I became the 95 one, right? I was perceived as aggressive. I was perceived as direct, right? And obviously, as someone who's also a red type personality, and the directness that I got from how I was raised and the culture I'm coming from, it didn't help the situation. And let's say the Canadian culture is more polite, more gentle, which also took me a while to because like you don't always get those body language cues. You don't always get them. Sometimes this is something that like you've been just being perceived this way, but you have no idea. Let's say I think only 2 years into my role at Baxter, suddenly I received the feedback from a very high level individual at Baxter saying like, this is the way that you are perceived. Now, for me, obviously, let's say I come with a certain set of values, and I believe that those individuals that I may hurt in my way to live through my values and to help the values of the organization, I may hurt them. They have the same values, they're just expressed differently, right? So the first thing I did was like calling all my direct team and saying, firstly, if I did anything in the way I conduct that hurt your feelings, I apologize, right? Also explaining like why I operate this way and those elements that drive me, right? Eventually, let's call it, I'm driven by success and I'm shaped by failures. So, and also told them, if you have any concern or like you have any feedback from me, like please feel free to reach out to me. and tell it to me directly, right? Like, I have a very rough skin, and so just like feel free. And I think and this was like probably 6 or 7 calls within those 2 hours. Not to mention the cross-functional team that I said, all right, I won't call each one of them individually. But I think once I got this feedback, I also myself took a step back and started to reflect of the way I operate and what could I do to improve it so I will get a better collaboration from my team and the cross-functional team. And let's say 3 years after, I believe that I did improve, and I still work on this improvement. But my point to anyone who listens, no matter where you're coming from, there will be a cultural difference that you should recognize, reflect, and act on it within reason. And when I say within reason, eventually, you don't want to get to a situation when you put a mask when you go to work every day. So you would like to still feel fit while you bring your true self to work, which I'm at this level at the moment.
Well, and I think, that's such a fair point. And, one of the reasons organizations are embracing diversity and inclusion and, is so that we understand people are coming from all different countries and from all different perspectives and experiences and communication, and we need to be more aware. It's not just on the part of the individuals who come to our country. It's also on us, right? I'm first generation Canadian, and so I understand newcomers as well. And we had a program for a number of years helping immigrant pharmacists, newcomers, come to this country to go through the licensing process so they could work in Canada. So I have a very intimate knowledge of what that's like and how difficult it is. But I think that it's both parties, right, that really need to sort of have a better understanding and not be, I'll use the word judgmental, and really embrace those differences and help people and communicate and not just, like, for instance, the way that you were talking about, the way you communicate and look at it as aggressive, but to understand that it's a different communication style. And if you are doing something that's making people feel uncomfortable, or your communication style is abrasive, don't wait 2 years to tell you, right?
Yeah.
Communicate that sooner, or to help you, because somebody who's not a newcomer could be doing that as well and needs that feedback, right? It's not just yourself. It could be anybody that's communicating that way, that some people feel uncomfortable. They don't like it, right? It makes people feel uncomfortable. But, being diverse means you're bringing different individuals into an organization that have different perspectives, knowledge, right, into an organization. And, it's important that organizations do that. And inclusion is probably the most important, so that people feel included into the organization, and that inclusion happens completely. And when you do that, you have, a higher retention in the organization. You don't have people leaving because you're bringing individuals like yourself into an organization, and there's no sense of inclusion where they feel that there's value in what they're contributing to an organization. And I think obviously you've been at Baxter as an example for a number of years, and your previous company to that, your retention is high. So you must have felt a sense of inclusion and that you were valued and promoted and so forth, obviously. So is that correct?
Yes, this is correct. And I would also add, specifically when you're in a place like Toronto or Mississauga, and with an organization like Baxter, and that does believe in inclusion and diversity. Many times, my friends ask me, don't you feel different when you're in Canada? And at Baxter, you'll find people from different countries,
Yeah.
from different countries working just like next to you. And I always tell my friends, well, basically, no, I don't feel different because I'm a foreigner. I'm a foreigner within foreigners. So it's not that I'm unique. I'm
Yeah.
not unique at Baxter. This is not like a place that you come in and say, oh, like who is this person out of this like 99%? No, like we are all different. We all have like different way we operate, and I think also those cultural differences. I think everybody probably did their own homework, and what do they want to bring to the company and to the organization, and like their true, I hope, the true self when they come to work.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure, like just like me, other people did it as well. But I could tell you that like, when I wake up in the morning, they get 100% Harel,
Yeah, it's good.
which
Yeah.
I'm happy with. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, that makes the difference, right? You want to go to work and love what you're doing and feel like you're contributing to the organization, and you're excited to go to work every day, and you feel like you're happy to see the peers around you, right? You're and the people that work for you, et cetera. Like you know, that's what we do. Love what you do and money will follow, right?
Yeah.
Now, did you have a mentor, or do you have a mentor that has helped you, you know, that supports you? Is that something that has contributed to you successfully coming to Canada and in the medical device industry at all?
When I came, like when I initially came to Canada, I didn't have like any official mentor. I did look around, I did ask people, but
Oh,
no one of them was like sort of mentor. However, when I had my first interview, not my first interview, but my last interview at Baxter, I met Victoria Jurencic. Back then, she was a VP for the renal care business at Baxter. And I remember she asked me in the interview, like she was concerned about my engineering background and the way I will communicate to people. After we resolved it, then she asked, like, where do you live? And I'm in Vaughan. Oh, I live in Richmond Hill. Oh, do you want a carpool? Right? Like interview with a VP. Do you want a carpool? Right? So like she laughed in an instant. I think 10 minutes after the interview over, I got a call from the recruiter. You're in. You're gonna get an offer. And like my connection with Victoria was instant. I think we firstly share values. She knows that she's my official mentor. Let's say every time that I have question when it comes to professional conduct and I have doubt, Victoria will be my go-to person to ask. And I think the benefit of having specifically Victoria, that I think we're very similar in our traits. So many times, let's say you may have a mentor that will be very different from you. You'll get an advice, but let's say go back to the mask comments that I put before. Like if you apply this suggestion, basically it's something that is beyond, I would just say your scope, but beyond your level of comfort compared to self. However, when I reach out to Victoria and I get a suggestion, nothing contradicts my values or my true self. Like this is like whether you apply or not. So I'm very grateful to have Victoria, and I hope that we'll keep in touch ongoing basis.
It's interesting that you talk about the mask, and I will often say to candidates during the interviews, like when we're recruiting for clients and a candidate's going to go out to the interview, I always say at the very end, be yourself. Whatever you do, make sure you're yourself. And the reason I say that is because at the end of the day, when you're at work and you know you're through your orientation and you're settled into your role, you need to be yourself. And if you weren't yourself in the interview and they hired somebody else, boom, right? There's going to be a problem. Either you're not going to be happy with the role because you presented something else, or they're not going to be happy with you because they saw someone else. You always want to be authentic, because you work to live, not the other way around. So finding that right fit, and always, like you said, be yourself. And I think for newcomers, that's a really valuable point to make, because you have to be who you are. You can't change and be somebody you're not. Yes, do you want to really understand the culture and how to communicate more effectively? probably, we all do, right? It doesn't matter if you come from another country or not. Communication amongst your peers or your friends or your loved ones is key. It's essential to be able to move the needle, to be successful in life, to have a happy life, period. But I think your point around, the mask, don't put it on. Be yourself always. And, you'll be happier. I think that's one of the most important things that you probably shared here. Is there any other, as a last closing question, anything else that you'd like to share that you have felt has been, very important to you in terms of being successful, that has really stood out for you in terms of, coming to Canada, that really helped you be successful in your career? Any other tips?
Well, we spoke a little about the network and how to maintain it, leverage it, and extend it. But I would just give an example. When I started my pursuit towards my passion, which is medical device, I had some difficulties, right? And one of the tips that I got from my inner circle was, hey, maybe reach out to someone on LinkedIn that does the exact same thing on the same industry, and just ask them, what did you do in order to get this position, right? So I said, okay, this is an interesting approach. And my first attempt, I reached out to Andrew Carmichael. I've never met the guy. Back then, he was a product manager at ConMed. And sending him a LinkedIn message, my name is Harel. I'm looking for my new role in medical device industry in Canada. I find your LinkedIn profile intriguing. Thank you for connecting. He replied, thank you for connecting. Let me know if there's anything I can help with. That was his reply. I replied back, well, I've searched through ConMed website. I didn't see any opening, but if something pops up, let me know. And the message I got from him, funny, I just accepted another role in the US for ConMed. And these positions that I hold now will be open within weeks. Send me your resume and I'll send it to my manager. I got an interview, right? First attempt from a tip that, let's say, not many probably would embrace consistently, right? But my point of this statement is don't be shy to ask help.
Yeah.
Because from my experience, the vast majority want to help. They want to help
Absolutely.
you, but you need to be acceptable of this help, and also to recognize that you need help, which is okay, right? Yeah. But if you need help and you don't ask for it, very few will recognize you need it, and there are some cases that maybe it will be too late. Right? So I want to thank in this opportunity to Andrew, who had a birthday on December 29th. And
you're so nice. You know what, Harel, I think that last point that you made is, what Andrew did, you're correct. People genuinely do want to help, right? They do, if they possibly can. And if you don't ask, you don't get, right? It's simple.
And that goes to my mom's mantra. Because they know he's already in your back pocket.
Yeah, that's right.
She was right. Thank you, Mom.
Yeah. So you want to reach out to people, and LinkedIn is a networking platform. And, I always say to candidates, think of it as going to a conference. Think of it as just going it's in person, but it's on the platform. So if you were at a conference, you'd walk up to people, you'd say hi, you'd get introduced. Think of LinkedIn as the same thing. It's a social platform, that it's a business one that you can reach out to people, but that's the purpose of it, right?
Yeah.
So
I would also argue that indeed network, but this is also a learning platform, right?
Yes, you can do that too. Absolutely.
The strategy of any candidate, any employee, is to stay relevant to the industry. And the only way to stay relevant to the industry is to follow the trends and to understand. It's not only follow the pack, it's to anticipate where the pack will be when you are at this time frame. For me, LinkedIn, this is where I consume content. This is where I follow activities. This is where I see what other people do. This is where I'm getting exposure to other topics that are in my mind. And eventually, if you're not being developed while you're in your position, not only is that you stay put, you go behind, because the world does move forward. And this is like a treadmill. that you suddenly put the emergency button. You would
Yeah,
just
it's an absolutely fantastic point, because when I interview individuals, the amount of individuals that do not take training, don't upgrade themselves, they aren't going on LinkedIn Learning or watching podcasts like this or listening, they're not continuing to educate themselves and stay current. You're absolutely bang right on. It's really important, especially if you're passionate about the life sciences industry, whether it's medical device, dental, biotech, doesn't matter, whatever one it is, you want to stay current. You want to find out what companies are merging, what companies are, developing and launching a new disruptive technology, whatever's happening in the industry, you want to know and stay current. Or if it's sales training or marketing, whatever your skill set is, you want to stay current and you want to stay sharp. And individuals that do, they get jobs, boom, like that. And, they make more money for sure. So
and also to be present in this platform, right? Like these days, personal branding is super important. And I always like to tell those who try to reach out to me and ask for help, personal branding is like planting a tree. The best time was 20 years ago. The next best time is now. Like if you haven't done it so far, go right at it. And I hope that people will take on it. This is a great platform. I learn a lot from it. I connect to interesting people from the industry. Opportunities coming your way, regardless whether you're interested or not, they're coming. You just need to keep your eyes open. And for those who come and look for their first opportunity, be proactive and be hopeful.
Right. That's great advice. I post on that all the time, and I'm surprised just every day how individuals are not embracing that, or any other social platform for that matter. They're just not doing it. I don't know why. And then all of a sudden they need a job and they're so behind, right? They don't even have 500 connections on LinkedIn. So it's, so important to, listen to some of the tips that we're talking about here and to start embrace them, because it's important.
Yeah. And again, I'm happy to help. So anyone who listens to this podcast and would like to have some advice from a newcomer, feel free to reach out to me on my LinkedIn page.
Thank you.
And I'll be happy to help.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I do appreciate you being a guest, and it's great that we've made connection and have gotten to know each other over the last few months. And I wish you the best, and where I am, I'm always happy to help you. So
thank you very much, and thank you for having me. This is very exciting and a new turf.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks so much, and you have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.